In introducing my guest for today, I want to read a little of her words. The archetypes of women that offend, provoke, and stir feelings of enchantment, arousal, and disgust are where I find my inspiration, because what I have discovered is that there is a great secret power hidden in these places, but culture compresses it, distorting it and contorting the purity of its brilliance. When I first met Shaney, she came to me as a client when I had my Heart of Tantra studio in Melbourne many years ago. She had already been working as an erotic dancer for many years. In this episode, although we aren't talking much about dancing, Shaney shares some of the things that she's been through, from diving deep into the mud to seek liberation with no guarantee whatsoever to rise as the lotus in places where not many genuinely succeed in turning poison into medicine as part of their sadhana. Later, Shaney became a teacher, a guide for other women who want a safe and conscious context to explore the many aspects of feminine expression, places that women like Shaney and I had to discover in environments that are not at all easy or supportive to be in. And now we both offer ways for women to explore taboo aspects and expressions of themselves, which would normally just remain dormant and hidden otherwise. I'm convinced that liberating authentic female desire is the number one thing in transforming the patriarchal sex paradigm. And because I know that society will not, I want to honor today's guest, Shaney, and any woman who has managed to uncover and retain the felt sense of her embodied female power in the challenging places. Welcome, everyone, to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, Beyond Patriarchal Sex, a place for both women and men to elevate ourselves, finding out what it takes to live beyond our conditioning and assumptions, not only for ourselves, but also for the coming generations. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these conversations. Okay, so I'm really happy to be sitting here today with Shaney-Marie. And gosh, we met a really long time ago when I had a tantric healing studio in Melbourne, Australia. And I remember you coming in there and us doing some work. And, both of us work with women, but have worked with men as well. So there's an interesting crossover of the probably personal, but also teaching experiences that you and I have both had. And so I'm really happy you could come and connect with this project today, Shaney.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I remember that. You introduced me to the jade egg,
Yeah,
actually. Mm, it's a
yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I'll just read a little bit about you, everyone. So, Shaney-Marie is an erotic mystic muse and mentor, guiding women through the mysteries of sensual embodiment, volatile initiation, and feminine liberation as a generative path of awakening. And so, I originally invited you to come and explore with me how women can become more aware of patriarchy basically around us, but also within us, so that we aren't unconsciously playing into the male gaze. And that's actually a pretty big part of the work that I do in embodiment training with women. But I just noticed that I don't really say too much about it on social media directly. And I noticed sometime recently that you have been, and some of the comments that I saw you getting, and I thought, oh, wow, I can see a lot of women don't even understand this distinction that women
Mm.
like you and I make. And so I wondered if we could hone in on that, but there's actually quite a few topics
that you and I mean, we could talk for hours and hours, Shani, about these things. So we might meander everyone on a few different current things that have been getting both of our attention. But maybe if we start there with, yeah, what were those messages, if you remember recently, that you were putting out, and what kind of comments were coming your way?
I think that maybe you're referring to I found myself on a an account about turning men masculine. I think that that's maybe the pieces that you're referring to. Um, and it was actually someone that I was relating with, a guy I was relating with was following this account. And on the surface, it was like the account made sense. It was like, yeah, like men like stepping into their providership and their like masculinity and their potency and getting to the gym and all this kind of like this culture. But then every now and then there'd be this kind of post that would be like an undercurrent of seething like hatred towards women and really like misogynistic and degrading, but very slippery in the way it was articulated. And it would just like really get my protectress up. And so I ended up having all these dialogues with all of these men. And it's very kind of like Tateism kind of programming, like the Andrew Tate kind of red pill, extreme sphere. And it was like every response I got was like a script, and they weren't bots, but it was like a script. And it's like the internet is handing all these men this playbook, and the playbook is just like the same programs, and they think that they're exiting some like matrix, but actually all they've done is f found themselves stuck inside another matrix where
Yeah.
it's constantly programming them to believe that women can't love men. We only want one thing, which is resources. We all want 6 foot tall, rich men. We're all and it was like all the stuff like we're all essentially sex workers. That's one of Andrew Tate's ideas that all women are sex workers. And with this kind of lack of awareness of like, well, if all women are sex workers, all men are Johns. It's kind of like if that's the paradigm you're going to be looking at things through, and anyway, so I was getting all of these really aggressive kind of responses, and I started to bring it forward on the internet and through my content. And I noticed that a lot of people were very uncomfortable with me bringing this content forward because historically, a lot of people started following me because of my uplifting of men and my devotional work with men, which was very much like neo-tantric um, centered, and it was all about like helping women clear their negative beliefs about men. And it's like all the people that followed me on that thread are having a hard time receiving the part of me that's actually getting more and more discerning and more vocal and nasty in some ways about this degenerate stream that I'm noticing that is like the polar it's like the match. It's like the match for toxic feminist ideology. It's like all the same beast and the same victimization and blame and all of these things, and they're kind of like just feeding each other now. And yeah, it's like it seems like I can't really speak to one side without people saying I'm a man hater. Or if I speak about the toxic feminist aspect, people say like I'm conditioned by the patriarchy. And, so it's like whatever side you're speaking to, people are going to have a problem with it. And what I'm really noticing is like, can we just see that so much of this dialogue is not truth? It's just people trying to work out their wounds, and they're not doing a very good job of it and perhaps getting stuck looping inside these kind of wounded narratives. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what you were referencing.
Well, I remember us having a little online chat around this theme, but that's not the one that I meant, but that's totally cool because we can delve into both. And yeah, I mean, there obviously is a script that these guys, someone's disseminating it. And it seems to be a lot of PUA, pickup artist stuff that has become really toxic. And like you said, people are actually just trying to sort out their wounds, but they're grabbing hold onto this rhetoric that is extremely damaging to the potential for intimacy in relationships, which is what some of them complain about not having, and they're really not helping themselves. But my biggest concern in amongst all of that is the miseducation that it's giving to young boys and the research that's come out of like people pretending to be a 14-year-old boy, for example, and finding like starting a brand new Instagram account with that demographic profile. And it just so quickly showed this supposed boy all of this manosphere information that is extremely misleading, so distorted, really not helping him at all. So, yeah, while I see a lot of adults struggling and wrestling with it all, I feel like the biggest concern is the kind of distorted relating that's happening and prone to happen more between young men and young women.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm really grateful for people who can hold that dynamic edge like you are, where you can speak to the distortion from the place that you have as your baseline. But for anyone to understand that and not just typecast you into a certain box, they would have to understand nuance. And that's
Mm.
a really important thing that's just missing for a lot of people, especially if they're attached to those ideologies because it has so little nuance in it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's all been very revealing. I mean, I think the internet's not helped us, like social media around the extremist views. People have to kind of get into black and white spaces to kind of participate rather than like it's almost like bridging the left and right hemisphere to be able to look at the different nuance and have empathy and be able to put yourself in the position of the opposite sex and really like allow yourself to feel, oh, what would it be like to be enduring these sorts of difficulties or challenges, being in that kind of body, getting bombarded with this kind of information. And I think that people are really lacking that ability to know how to be empathic, um, and even just a willingness to sit themselves. And this includes like women, right? Like I've seen this so much in feminist space, like the absolute unwillingness to really sit themselves in the experience of men and have compassion for that challenge because it has its own set of unique challenges compared to a female body,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and I feel like that's kind of like relating work 101. You know,
yes,
and
yes. Nuance and empathy is how to access that, what that sounds like, what that looks like in expression, um, can get a bit lost in the polarization vortex of the online world. And yeah, it's quite sad. Um, and I think that typically the people who are in that really polarized place, they don't know where to put women like us because we're so textured, so nuanced in where we're coming from, where we truly are advocates for men having strong, healthy masculinity, especially if they've already recognized that that's missing and that they want more of that. But at the same time, being really clear about, well, what is healthy, strong masculinity versus patriarchy? Because that's an extremely important nuance, and a lot of missing education is there. So when women like yourself and I speak up about those things, it can be easy for people to say, well, why are you being negative? Why are you being critical? You must think like this because you said that. It's kind of ridiculous. It's really quite ridiculous.
Mm. Yeah,
But
I kind of liken it to, you know how you watch old films and the characters are really one-dimensional? like a black and white film or something. It's kind of like we're in those times. It's like people need to cast these kind of very, like one-dimensional caricatures of the opposite sex in order to somehow process something. But the more evolved film has got, like I watched Baby Girl recently. I don't know if you've seen it with Nicole Kidman. It's really interesting. And what I loved about it, it's a film about her and this kind of baby dom. And she's married. And what was really cool was often those films with high sexual tension and power play would be quite kind of one-dimensional. It's like the dom is like a certain level of mastery, and then there's this submissive, and there's this kind of thing happening. But in this film, there was nuance of characters layered, and the relationship aspects of her and her husband, and the baby dom, and even the next generation. It was like this kind of this tension point of like old world relationship dynamics versus kind of new world layered into the film. And yeah, that's how I see culture right now. It's like people can't really don't really know how to be with the evolving parts and the multiple layers of nuance that we are now having to really grasp to be able to see truth, right?
Yes.
And so we just go back to these like simple caricatures to try and make sense of the world because it's all too overwhelming to look into, oh wow. And because that would also require us to look at ourselves, right? And look at our own nuance and the complexity of our own feeling world. And if you can't do that, then you're going to project simplicity in black and whites, I think. So,
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And yeah, alongside that, I just noticed kind of recently how many women online are almost quite suddenly feeling free to be really fucking angry. And I remember tuning into just how much that's happening collectively. And I'm not saying that's wrong or bad in any way. It's just an observation, right? And I kind of felt like, oh, it's actually really cool to see women give themselves that permission to not, um, have to maintain this soft, nice energy in the face of extremism that is coming from a lot of guys. And at the same time, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not in that place of just being really freaking angry. Like I moved through that quite some time ago, but it's really interesting to watch it en masse being a place that's unlocked in the collective feminine and appreciating it, but not being part of it exactly at the same time. And yeah,
yeah, and I think for people like us who work in the fields that we do, I think we can kind of zoom out a little bit and see that there's like a collective purge happening, and that and for me, I trust it. I trust the purge that's happening collectively on some degree. But if you zoom in, you see the details of like people suffering and people being harmed and all of that. And so that's a different dimension to sit inside of. But yeah, I think that if we're just going to look at like the narratives that are being kind of yeah, like participated in, and the female rage, for instance, and also male rage. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing the bitterness coming forward from a lot of men and this like lonely male loneliness epidemic, and it's like, okay, like this didn't come out of nowhere. There's where are these threads coming from, and what is required for these parts to be healed so that people don't just loop in their trauma, right? Because it's all, I mean, I perceive it as it's all trauma, and usually I think it's multi-generational that's being
yeah,
asked to be really faced and cleared so that a new reality can be stepped into.
yeah,
Have
yeah.
to deal with
And
our lineage. Mm.
yes. And both of those things that you've identified as being so missing, being nuance and empathy, tend to just naturally evolve more in physical proximity. And all of this is happening online, which is easier to be removed from the humanness. And so there's so many layers and textures and important places of connectivity that people aren't experiencing on actual embodied level. And so it just locks them into their mental positions and perceptions around really big themes. That is like for the first time ever, people are processing it without real interaction. So
Yeah,
there's this reducing of the full textures of the type of woman they might be talking about because, yeah, they just feel safe to vent and be aggressive and get it all out about a caricature, not realizing that, well, actually, this is like a whole real person that you might be talking about, and what else is involved in that. And usually, all of those layers don't get noticed, felt, seen, and experienced without that real human contact, right?
totally, totally. And I think that like we know that trauma doesn't fully shift when we're just talking about it, right? So people are online just like constantly with these narratives, and so nothing, and there's a level of purge happening, but there's also an inflammation emerging out of that. And we know that where trauma heals is generally through like regulating the system, being able to be in our bodies, and also like co-regulating with others, right? Like
Yeah.
that's so deeply healing in the way that it re-imprints like safety in the body, and who we are when we're safe is very different to who we are when we're inflamed and full of these kind of toxic aspects that are seeping their wounds out.
Yeah.
And so it's been really curious for me, like because I've been dating actually this last 2 years, and upon meeting like new men, like I'll often just ask if we can just bring our bodies together and co-regulate to see like what the hum is with our bodies. And it's been so beautiful because in my 20s, I usually would have just gone in and just had this kind of wild experience, but instead I'm having inviting these guys into this co-regulation, and it's usually something that they haven't experienced before. They've never had someone pause with them in that way and just like be curious of how the nervous systems can meet. And
Yeah.
I wish people could do that more, just even in a non-sexual context, just like, oh, what is it to bring our bodies together? And what could emerge from this? Yeah, this
Yeah.
way of relating. Mm.
Yeah, it's super wise to bring in that titration in romantic relationship getting together because it will just tell you so many things, you know. Yeah. The I mean, when I was younger, I also I don't know if this was your experience exactly, but went for, much more intimacy than I really needed to in getting to know someone, right? And it's just like this common place and that women have typically operated from, especially if they have a lot of training in sexuality, including sacred sexuality work. And I'm noticing that these days and really current times, women are getting wiser than that, and they're more integrated in wanting to really check the alignment on multiple levels of reality instead of just opening the doors to the temple.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because we know what happens, and this is one of the things the manosphere actually gets right is around female bonding and the way that when we if we don't know how to biohack, I think ourselves, I think we when we open and when we bond with someone sexually, like it creates a lot of oxytocin in our systems, and then we find ourselves bonded to people that perhaps are not aligned and aren't fully what we need in our lives, and that we've bonded too quickly. And so there is actually wisdom in that as well. Um, yeah, which has been curious. I think that's a curious conversation for women, particularly in this realm of like sexual freedom to be having, because when we bond with someone that and we haven't had that regulation or those conversations, and we haven't been clear on had clarity about exactly what we're wanting from a relationship, and we just slide in. Like I was listening to this dating book and she talks about sliding versus deciding. And I was like, oh, I've slid into every relationship I ever had because I bonded so quickly. And then I was like, actually, like we're not compatible on these things and these things. And so I think that there's wisdom in this slowness, and there's wisdom in um, knowing yourself and knowing how you connect, and to maybe, yeah, to just be mindful about that as a woman, and know what chemicals are going to start kicking off and what effect they have on us, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. It's like quite the download that young women are able to have these days straight from the beginning in how to take care of themselves, how to understand that power of oxytocin inside of them and, so many things. It's definitely a lot to be aware of. It's a lot to know about and understand, or not, and then learn from those experiences as
Yeah,
well.
and it's so intoxicating. And then we wonder why we're like, falling for being love bombed, or like, um, the nervous system gets lit up. Like I had this experience where I was with this guy and he just like love bombed me. And I was in a very vulnerable point. I'd just lost my nana and my father, and I'd not been having any fun in my life. And so I went on these dates with this guy, and I knew I could see what was happening. But I just wanted to go because he lit my nervous system up so brightly that I was like having such a good time. And then of course on the other side you have that dip, and I think a lot of women, because they don't realize what's happening, it's just they're just having the experience. They don't know how to hold themselves or what resources they have when the chemicals drop, when you're no longer being fed, your nervous system's being fed with the fantasy and the love addiction and all the things that are making you feel so high. How do we be with ourselves in those times where um, we're not getting what feels good anymore, right? And I think that's a big part of the work that we do, is supporting women how to self-hold and how to, have sisterhood. Like having sisterhood, healthy sisterhood is one of the most important resources we can have. And what's been interesting about this manosphere is I see so many subtle messages being fed to men, that men essentially need to isolate women from sisterhood, and that essentially women need to not be talking to their sisters or to other women about their relationships, because, and this is like a classic cult and abuse tactic, right? To isolate. And
Yes.
it infuriates me. It makes me so angry because, as someone who's been violently abused, like in my late teens, I was in an extremely violent relationship. And if it wasn't for the love of my sisterhood, my community, like if they had have abandoned me, like I don't know what situation I would have been in, but they were there loving me through it when I was ready, and that saved my life. And so when I see these messages and they're often framed in very kind of virtuous ways, of like framing like, oh, that a relationship shouldn't be tainted by a woman's friends' opinions, right? And I get that there's dysfunctional groups of women who are operating in levels of like gossip and, this kind of hyper independence, like, oh no, fuck him. Like also don't understand nuance. These were not necessarily wise women, but we need to be cultivating um a, a I don't know, a culture of sisterhood that is wise and does have elders and does have the voices of, yeah, different diverse people, so that we can get good counsel, right? Because isolating women is very dangerous, actually. And it's why, always think about like lionesses and how they work together. They work together, and any threat that comes into their pride, like I don't know, like a weaker male, a predator or something, they work together to like get that predator out, that threat to their cubs or whatever, and I think about that and I'm like, yeah, women need to be in packs. Like,
Yeah, it's natural. So to go against nature, I can see that you've looked more into the rhetoric of the manosphere more than I have maybe. You've like I know you said a little while ago,
Deep.
you really dived in. Um, yeah. And what I'm hearing in that, especially around an intention to isolate women, the woman from other women, not only is that a well-known coercive control tactic, like you said, that cults often utilize, it's also present in some religious ideology, like Christianity and Islam, where they have quite strong social norms that you're not even meant to talk about any relationship dynamic. And that even if you were bring it to your own parent, that you're not meant to have their influence either, which is completely cutting off that mature advisory opportunity and allowing, yeah, well, having the woman stay misinformed, uneducated, unsupported, so she's more likely to endure whatever. And I see how it's really not in a healthy man, in the case of a healthy man, it's not in his favor for a woman to be isolated. You know, like I'm thinking of the tigress community and the tigress practice, like when women get together, they're venting out so much um, hidden emotional stuff that they didn't even know was there on the surface, but in the midst of the practice, they're getting out so much stress and tension and like literal toxicity out of their physical bodies that they then do not go and vent onto their partners and children. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like there's I can think of so many ways that it's not in men's favor to be advocating for that.
mm.
So crazy.
And it also, like, I think a lot about like how once upon a time men and women were more naturally segregated, right? Like, and I think that, in those spaces where women were really, it was supported that men and women had their separate spaces and that women were being initiated by other women and women were learning about the erotic arts with other women and women were dancing, like women were mostly dancing for other women. They weren't really dancing for men. Like that's kind of a newer thing, or it would be like a special occasion, but mostly women were dancing together, right? And transmitting together and mirror neuron swapping and all of that. Um, and so I think like in this piece around patriarchy, um, yeah, I think these female arts that were enclosed in female spaces have been exploited under capitalism and under, this kind of modern way. Like even like, stripping, it's always been there, but it wasn't really commodified. Like in the modern sense until like the 80s, the 70s and 80s, with titty bars and things like that. So we've got this kind of capitalistic, um, yeah, monetization, exploitation of of the erotic arts that once upon a time were like sacred practice and sacred space and were always there, right? But they were in the temple. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Mm.
Yes, the temples became the taverns.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
I'm dipping into Hafiz to say those words. Yes, so the removal really of having a female reference for the divine is when things really went downhill. And this insertion of God being male, the sky daddy religions that are the major religions of the world that people know. So there's a lot within that whole cluster which directly empowers patriarchy in how that plays out on a collective level and an interpersonal relationship level. But maybe because you brought up, what it's like exploring sensuality, female power with women, and how that got commodified and then how that ends up looking different. So maybe here is a great place to open up that inquiry around how can a woman know the difference of when she's playing into um, without even realizing it, playing up to the male gaze for validation, for approval, and thinking that she's really empowered in her sensuality, maybe, but not realizing that there's a distinction of when it's
Mm,
done in that way compared to when it's truly for herself. And like you said, it was a healing capacity amongst women. It was a somatic education process amongst women. And also, when I tune into the goddess times, it's also you're dancing for the divine, you're dancing for God, you're being moved from that level. It's not even for human eyes, really, and then to be able to witness a woman who's in that level of total connectedness, um, that would then be so healing because there's nothing in her that's trying to hook anyone's energy or attention on her because she's in actually a very pure place of total alignment, total absorption into, yeah, communion with divine Eros.
mm,
And so to be able to witness that would be completely reorientating as opposed to a woman who's trying to elicit a response in a man's body or wanting to hook his energy, his attention on her. And
yeah.
I know that you and I have both played with these edges in our ways in the world, utilizing the taverns to work out expressions in ourselves, to be able to have come to the awareness and the embodiment that we both now have, right?
Mm,
And I don't know what it was that inspired it. I didn't look at the background, but I remember you trying to share about this nuance online and women not getting that you were being supportive, but they were hearing criticism or negativity or something like that. Like they were lacking this nuance that we're talking about. So I think some people were putting it in the category of, like let's just not shame women for expressing themselves. Um,
mm,
right? But it's like, yes, and is it truly empowering? Truly
yeah,
empowering if we are not discerning about how we go about that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is massive. This is huge. This beast to go into. Um, and and it's huge because there is so much nuance, right? Because from my experience, so people might interpret things that I say sometimes that is shaming. And my experience is I'm not shaming, I'm illuminating, and then it's coming from a place of it's okay. Like it's coming from a place of there's approval for all of these parts. I'm not disapproving and going, "Oh, that part's wrong and needs to go." It's like, no, this part is here. For example, the thirst trap. Right, so the women like they use their bodies as a way to like really pull on male sexuality. So if anyone's gone through a man's Instagram account where you see like the suggested things, you'll often see a lot of thirst traps. They're being fed this kind of content that's very succubusy. And I am so okay with my succubus. So I just want everyone to know that that's the place it's coming from. Like I have a deep like erotic love for the vampiric parts of me. But the difference is I'm really conscious of these parts. And so I've been able to role play and meet them and like learn about the tactics and where it's coming from. And so is it coming from a place of survival in me or is it coming from somewhere else? And that's always my curiosity. And I also am really deep in deep approval with the parts of me, and this is a curious place to kind of bring this, the parts of me that love being fed on by the male gaze. right? So I'm an approval of this. I'm an approval of the part of me that likes to be told I'm a good girl sometimes. I let I let there's a sex doll aspect to some shapes of my sexuality that I bring because I'm just like, I want to meet it. I want to see this part. I want to love it. And so when women go, oh, that you're judging, it's like, no, no, like I can meet this. And there's like a I don't, I don't know what the word is, but it's like there's places that we travel. And I feel like I can't be empowered in these kind of more, I don't know, I guess more classically patriarchal components of my sexuality. I can't be empowered in those if I'm not also meeting the other ends of the spectrums, which is my deep vulnerability, which is my divinity, which is my ability to really feel like the universe inside of me, like rumbling and like, so we get to play this whole spectrum. And the beauty and the like fun of it is that it's all sensation, right? And so I'm just meeting it all as sensation. And so when I talk about embodiment and like a someone dancing for the male gaze, it's like what is the sensation in that experience? And yeah, and what I see in some of the thirst trappy content is that there's not sensation, right? And there's a vapidness to the experience.
Yeah.
And it's quite mental, like it's kind of being strategized from this part. And I think that the way through that is to start to make contact with the sensation. Like I was just kind of describing the parts that I'm in approval of. Oh, we can't actually feel the sensation until we get an approval of these parts. And what is it activating inside? What aspects of our shadow is it touching? And then I think what's really curious is how is it opening others? So is it simply about what I'm getting, which is a power play? So we have a power over dynamic, which as someone who worked in strip clubs, I know that component well of there's an element of power play or like almost like erotic kung fu, right? Like there's like how can I get really masterful at my craft and how can that and then we come together and there's like this tension point and what are we getting from each other and who's going to win what and like there's kind of like this combative element to one dimension of eroticism in that way, right? And then there's this whole other dance that is happening over here and that's um and I don't want to say it like it's a linear evolution because I'm not so much interested in that kind of escalator frame of like, oh, we have like the I don't know, the unconscious here and the conscious here and it's like I'm more interested in how it's all spiraling together and what is it creating and what is it getting us in contact with and can we meet the divinity in the I don't know, the part that wants to take and wants to get something from the experience and wants to be the thirst trap. Can we meet the divinity in that space? And then then can we meet the divinity in the other end, which is like, it's like the ways that the righteous, the righteous people perhaps like or Puritan culture often wants to demonize the
Yeah.
lower frequencies or low vibe or the underworld or the slut or so I don't think anyone's free anywhere in this kind of
Yes.
description that we've given if they're still othering if they're still um positioning themselves as superior to one or the other.
Women often ask me how they can get their partner into this exploration of living beyond patriarchal sex. And my answer is often this: to firstly open a wider discussion by listening to a podcast episode here together and to take the patriarchal sex survey together, which you will find a link for under the description with each episode. You could also share this episode and discuss it with friends. And you can be part of this women's community where you will deepen relationship with yourself first, which then brings a different version of you to intimacy with highly effective practices. You can do this through a private mentoring intensive with myself, in group events happening globally online and sometimes in person. So join the email list from the tigresspath.com website to free yourself as a woman and be part of this evolution.
Right?
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And I mean, it's so normal and like clear to me that that's where you express from. But again, without that physical proximity, when women misunderstand and react and whatever, they're not feeling with all the cells of their body the experience emanating from the cells of your body. They're just seeing things in that very one-dimensional place, like you described before. And it's a shame that there's a lack of curiosity actually to be like, oh, well, she's been in this field a long time. Maybe let me look a little deeper into what she's saying. Um, so curiosity is another addition to that empathy and nuance that can tend to go missing. So if we're to break this down a little bit, uh, yeah, so it's not like women like yourself and I, it's not like we would ever say there's something wrong or unspiritual or lacking in awareness in the desire within you to be like fully seen, fully experienced in your expression from your body in particular. There's nothing wrong about that. That's a totally divine dynamic. But there's a way that a woman does it which she's vacant inside of it, or she's trying to change and distort her expression or her actual physical body to look like what she thinks the other wants from her. And so, where is the her, like truly in that? And I mean, a gauge for me that I have to know the distinction very, very clear. Not only is that embodied presence there for herself, but is the experience, like coming into the sensation you were talking about, is the experience of sensuality, sensual embodiment, healing for her in the moment that she's experiencing it. Is it life-giving,
Mm.
or is it just a mimic that has no internal connection, rootedness whatsoever? And we could be talking about porn just as much as dancing or how women are portraying themselves online. So it's really important that
We're
women.
talking about wives in the same way, right? Like women who marry and are not fully in the feeling, but there's a vacancy in them, but somehow they're postured as superior, right? Like it's just an experience. Sorry, I had to butt in with that bit, but it's like
Yes, totally. And then you just made me realize that I didn't ask you my question. What is patriarchal sex according to you? Because you
Well, I was going to ask you as well because I was like, I wonder how she
can't.
defines patriarchy in this frame. Maybe you go first. How are you? I was curious. Yeah, what is patriarchy?
Oh, what
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
patriarchy?
yeah, for you in this frame of how you're coming to.
To do with intimacy, sex, and relating?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, it's actually a huge question to answer, really. And I'll just say a few things about it right now. Like, it is a paradigm that takes space socially between us, relationally, and also inside of us, emotionally, psychologically, all of it. And it's pretty much the default setting for a lot of people because it's the paradigm we get born into. It's not natural at all, but it's been so normalized that it can be someone's default until they've unhooked themselves, unraveled themselves from it to find what is their naturalness underneath that. And when it comes to intimate relating, like you just said, one example of it really clear, when a woman as a wife, or a woman in a sexual relationship where she is, because the way that it lives in men and women is pretty specific, and both men and women uphold it to maintain it held in place inside of ourselves, between each other, and in the culture at large. We're all involved in either um, unraveling from it and, living from a different place of the beyond, or we're just unconsciously enduring it, accepting it, encouraging it. And both men and women do it. So when a woman, if I to go on the example that you just spoke before, so a wife, um, she's obviously consented to, hopefully, a sexual exchange with her partner, husband, but she's not in the experience for herself. It's more like a duty. And again, it comes back to that, is it truly life-giving and for both people mutually? And and pleasure is a natural byproduct of that. Orgasmicness is a natural byproduct of that. But if there's no internal presence, like she's in the experience for herself, and there is a deeply embodied mutual exchange happening, then that's one of the obvious and typical ways that women will express patriarchy in sex, because they are not feeling themselves from the inside, and they're literally misrepresenting who they are and perpetuating their own suffering. And there's just so many different ways that that can be expressed, whether it's how we're presenting ourselves online or whatever it may be.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. That was really beautiful. Thank you. It was very intricate. It was very intricate because, if I was to put it into like just, yeah, like a small kind of description, or just how I experience patriarchy, and to be honest, I don't give it a huge amount of my attention. Just because I'm just more interested in just living as the embodiment of what I want to be. But like, my understanding of patriarchy is essentially it's father rule, and that father could be, lineage father, or sky daddy father, like Abrahamic kind of religious father, and that we're living under these kind of um, conscious and unconscious rulerships and systems that have been programmed out of father rule and God and all of that. Um, and I do hold this position where I don't necessarily, I don't judge it as like inherently bad. Like, I'm not like looking at it and being like patriarchy equals like wrong, bad, t terrible thing. I feel like it's a part of a greater cycle, and that we're evolving out of it. And at the moment where we're at is it's rotting. It's a rotting system. And that I'm sure maybe at the times it was brought through, there was some sort of agreement that it was the best way to survive. Um, and I think that women are a part of that agreement and have been a part of that agreement, and were willing to sacrifice parts of themselves in order to have safety, or perceive, whether that was real safety or perceived safety, or I don't know, weaponized fear, or I don't know exactly how it went down, but I think that there's a lot there. Um, but I don't think that we were just passive bystanders. I think that there was some sort of exchange. We handed a level of our power over for something in return. Um, and I think like with intimacy, I really love what you said about like women not feeling themselves from the inside, because my view on patriarchy is that it compartmentalizes, and that it chops things into parts, and that the body is like chopped off from the head almost. And it's like, and I see this, and also coming back to the manosphere, I see a lot of like guys really, I see accounts where it's like everything's about like logic, not feelings, and there's this real like disregard and hatred for the felt experience. And we, yeah, and that these kind of ways in which we embody chaos and the sensory experience, and it's not a logical space, it's a deep mystery space, is really difficult for people who are still operating as controllers and dominators, that they don't have the capacity to surrender into the felt experience as a bare minimum, but also into the unknown and into the deeper intelligence of feminine regenerative psychular kind of experiences. So there's a gripping onto knowledge, or a gripping onto safety of some way that is like seen, and that the unseen experience and the in what is our felt experience is disregarded as inferior, and and as a byproduct of that, a huge amount of wisdom is being lost, um, because of this unwillingness to really meet a deeper wellspring of knowledge that I think is in the goddess cultures, and is in the body of woman, and is in places that are in reverence of the feminine.
Yeah.
Um, so and is in something like authentic intimacy, right? Like versus programmed, roles or scripts that people put themselves, put them or play out. Like for instance, there's this big porn star called Bonnie Blue, and she did this talk with Andrew Tate, and I was curious. I was like, oh, I wonder what she's like in porn. So I searched her porn, and I just watched the same script that plays out with every porn star. No aliveness, just these like this regurgitating of the same pornographic replay, the same language, the same positions, the same dominance, the same little slutty gaze, the same come on the face, like all, and it's just like, oh, it's just so vapid, and there's nothing um truly moving inside of this. And so I think
Yeah.
that the rot is actually manifesting in these kinds of scripts, and it's getting more and more empty,
Yes.
and more and more like, yeah, it's like people like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't like sex. Like even Andrew Tate says that, like he doesn't like sex because it's vapid, because they don't know how to touch the deep mystery of genuine intimacy with self, with lover, with life. And so of course it's going to feel empty and vapid. All you're doing is wasting this like vitality inside this program that's not nourishing. So of course
Yeah.
you're going to want more of that. Of course you're going to see it as a distraction and something that's like pointless. Of course you're not going to see it as life-giving other than procreation. You're not going to see it as spiritually life-giving. You can't, because it's compartmentalized from the depth of the experience,
Yeah.
right?
And if these guys think that that's all it is,
Mm.
like they really believe that, then, they're looking at what are their best options within that paradigm. How, like Tate in
Mm.
particular, like how can I just commodify these barely sentient creatures that he actually says those words about women, which is just mind blowing. But the distortions in that whole very patriarchal paradigm only get to live out the way that they are without the insertion or in the absence of that real embodied feminine presence and energy in expression. So all the ways that women are trying to play into the being the fantasy of the patriarchal male gaze are so complicit in holding that paradigm in place, right? Whereas what else could be happening to create an evolutionary way through? I mean, the number one thing to me to dissolve the whole paradigm of not only patriarchy, but patriarchal sex in particular, is for women to become so actualized in our own embodied desire. Like it is the number one most powerful thing to dismantle the whole orchestration that it's become. Because then a man really gets to experience, oh, like what really is a woman's body like? What really is it like to be with her? Like these men you're describing in dating, you know, and how you're being with them in a different way. Like even just that as an expression, as an example. When a woman is more full and taking up the feeling, sentient sensation space inside of her, rested in herself, grounded and anchored into herself, it's a completely different experience of being a woman. It's a completely different experience to experience a woman in that way,
Mm.
you know. And like I said to you before we pressed record, you know, I've been totally focused on this zone of actually truly empowered female sexuality for a really long time, as have you. And for me to only stay in that zone and have the basically small minority of the human population gravitate towards that is just not a satisfying experience after a certain point, after doing it for so long. And I just saw this huge gap in not talking to the in between, not creating enough of a path in a way or an understanding for people to connect to of why what they might be typically experiencing. Um, why would you move out of it? You know, if no one's even able to say what it is, if no one's able to speak up and say, actually, that's not the most empowered expression of embodying female sensuality. There's more to it. There's this, you know, and you've got to be courageous and risk being called, I don't know, critical and negative and whatever other bullshit to be able to bring some discernment through, right? Because, like I said to you before, you know, we've had decades and decades of incredibly beautiful, soulful, mystical guides, teachers explaining and have said everything that needs to be said to help people to move into sublime tantric experiences. It's all been there. And yet, a lot of people don't tap into it because they don't understand why they would need it. They don't understand the limitations of what they are immersed in.
Mm.
So it
Mm.
just felt really valuable to come down from a celestial realm, speak into in a way, right? Like with all these amazing guests that are coming on as well from many different pockets of society, including ones that are very high consciousness beings who don't normally deal with um, you know, what's going on in the manosphere and these different things, and actually creating opportunity to have these connection points and these conversations coming through.
Mm. It's really, yeah, it's beautiful. I just had that vision of like the sky dancers coming down and then they're like touching the demonic forces, right? Like they're merging with both because we have to be able to converse and be bridges for all worlds, which is why, you know, being able to dance the full spectrum is so important for me, to really get across that all of it is okay, because if we don't bring approval to all these parts, then we're going to be in rejection, and then we keep compartmentalizing and playing into this programming. And how can we bring loving presence to all of these different expressions of our sexuality, um, so that it is generative, so that it is life-giving, so that it is unlocking the power that is inside of us. Like I think about some of the spaces I've been in, and you'll know this as well, when you see a woman like land in her body and the amount of frequency that begins to emanate in the field. And you can see how, like, all these kind of mythologies talk about, like, women being able to change like the weather and this, and because you see it real time, you see the fractals, you see it become, it's like a psychedelic experience without being on the psychedelics. And women of all shapes and sizes and looks, and these guys like to be like, oh, she's a 10 and she's a 2 and this and that. It's like all of that dissolves, and
Right.
all you're left with is the frequency of the power of her essence. And it's the most phenomenal experience and gift to be in presence with, right? But these people still operating from this place are just, they're never gonna get that gift because the narrative just won't even allow them to expand beyond what is possible. But essentially because they haven't fully landed and activated in the heart, right?
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
very different person when the heart's activated.
Yeah. And without that, usually fear is running the show, running the system. And like you said, sky dance is coming down and touching those demonic places, and demonic energy can only be present, be there, feeding on like actual hungers,
Yeah.
so for women, for educators like us to be able to say those essential hungers, there's nothing wrong and bad about these feelings, about these places at all. It's actually divine. It's just like, here's a way more amazing experience of that over here in the beyond, where you actually are so profoundly empowered by the experience on multiple levels of reality all at the same time. And when nuanced voices actually have something to say that's not from the puritanical other end of the polarization, and is more like an offering of, well, yeah, these are bridges, these are spaces in between, right? Because all the things you actually want and long for, you know what? You can have it. It's available to you. Because
Mm-hmm.
while there might be a lot of men who are talking about the loneliness, there's also a lot of women that are not finding themselves having partners. And uh, so the online component of everything is certainly gotten everything to quite a state of chaos without that real human aliveness to communicate the more subtle, unspoken things to each other.
Totally. And I think that also a lot of this is coming out of people just not feeling safe with themselves. It's all projection, first and foremost, right? It's like, and the only way we can truly heal is not just individually, but it's also in connection, in community with others, which is why I think, tantric body workers and sex workers who are working with, sacred codes, as such gifts in so many ways, because they are encouraging the waking up of the heart. They are inviting people to be able to metabolize their feeling bodies, their feeling experiences, and get honest with their desires. And what I see online is people aren't even willing to be honest with the fact that they have desire, right? Like it's obvious to us from the outside that they have desire, but they themselves, that it's expressing through blame and shame and rejection and criticism, when actually if they just got honest with themselves just a few layers deeper, it would be like, oh, I actually deeply desire to be held. I deeply desire to be made love to. I deeply desire this thing that I can feel in some way, shape, or form is available, but I don't consciously know how to express that I want that. Um, or consciously even am aware that I could have that, right? Like there's a self-dishonesty epidemic, I think, more than male loneliness or female loneliness. It's like, can people get honest with the vulnerability first? And then shifts can change. We
Yeah.
can't change without honesty. I mean, otherwise it's just more delusion, more psychosis, and I think that that's what the online space is feeding is this psychosis, and
Yes.
people don't realize they're in a psychosis. I was in a psychosis, a very low level psychosis for 3 years, and I didn't even know I was in a psychosis until I popped out, and I look around, I'm like, these people are living inside psychosis and they don't know.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
justify it.
And to feel truly safe with oneself in one's own body, um, there has to be enough inner attention to develop that felt sense inside once again. And that is not something that normally people can just access straight up by themselves, and you mentioned something like this earlier. It's known in the trauma therapy space that, our relational wounds take a relational field to heal them. And so um, it's just kind of curious seeing where it's all going to go, because this escalation and echo chambers and amplification of distortion, it's only getting to happen because that real true connection and attunement and authenticity isn't being communicated between people's bodies, basically.
I think that people don't know what their roles are, and I think that there is pockets of society that unfortunately are kind of cast into a more kind of rejects, or places where they're not so accepted by society, and and I think this is why the teachings of archetypes like Lilith are so powerful, right? Because she brings love to all the rejected parts, including all the rejected children, right? And I mean that's just one aspect of her, but I think that yeah, there's this this unlovable kind of way that people are experiencing life, and they feel deeply unlovable, and then that gets put into a whole bunch of different narratives about different things, like incels, for instance, right? Like they're not getting essentially they think it's sex that they want, but they're actually just not getting the love that they deeply yearn for, and a nutrient. It's a nutrient deficiency that they didn't get imprinted from their parents. So they don't know how to, yeah, they don't know how to be loving with themselves, and they don't know how to love others, because I think that people who are vibrating love, doesn't matter what you look like, what your job is. You could be in a wheelchair, you could be, I don't know, anything. If you're vibrating love, you're going to magnetize more love around you.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's why, in the tantric arts, the heart being such a pivotal place of awakening. And what, as a ex-tantric body worker working with men, like all of my work was always centered around, the genitals as an access point, but ultimately moving the energy, the awareness into the heart space, with the, loving intention to open this part of the man's body, so that he could experience this nutrient of fullness and love and beauty start to pulse through his entirety. And when we're talking about like the vapidness and the emptiness, like a lot of it has got to do with the lack of sensory availability here. Because this here is where the energy really starts to flow and move through the whole vessel, right? Like it's pumping, the love is pumping through the system. Um, so if there's blocks and calcification in the heart and shutdown and freeze, then of course we're gonna go for wherever there's more dense sensation, which would be maybe sexual sensation with the ejaculation, and the hope that maybe I'll feel something, maybe I'll feel some sort of divinity, but it's never truly going to come until this part awakens, I think.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, the emphasis on love and coming into one's body and feeling that heart awakening from the inside out is definitely the exit point from that over conceptualized um, lonely place that a lot of people are finding themselves in. And I think one of the main things that's been highlighted today is how the catalytic power of embodied women to be able to be the transformation, create the transformation here, because that's the energy of creation that lives in us so abundantly and so intelligently that even in the most complex of situations can birth us through, basically. And I just love how I know that women feel at odds with this if they're in that place of currently feeling suddenly safe to vent a whole lot of anger. And I do understand that. Um, but I love how women's evolution to find that truly authentic moving from within, fully inhabiting self part of our expression and, really embodying our full pleasure and divine eros is our way, is our path. And it just by natural consequence, without trying to make the men change, without trying to, intentionally cause a whole lot of healing, it's just what happens naturally. And so to me, it's just highlighted yet again how this is something that when women like you and I, who have the discernment and the nuance and the empathy and the curiosity and the interest in that embodied shadow work, it's just so needed. It's just so incredibly needed. But I'm happy that we can take the time to kind of come out of our realms where we do pretty much totally focus on those processes and facilitating these experiences to speak to these places because, yeah, there's a perspective that we have to bring that's different to the mainstream narratives.
Mm. Mm.
Yes. So I just want to check, is there anything that you feel inspired to say as we come to a completion here around how can people, women, however you want to answer it, um, find their way into the beyond patriarchal sex?
Mm. God, there's just so many places that we could keep speaking into. I'm just like, this is like such a rich dialogue. And there's so many little threads I'd be like, oh, I should go down here, I should go down there. Because it just feels infinite. Yeah. I think I'm present to this kind of hungry ghost idea of the ways that we try and get fed. And the hungry ghost essentially has this kind of bottomless pit, right? Like if we're feeding our hungry ghost, like it's just never satiated, never enough, never enough. And I think that a hungry ghosts are really great teachers for where we are abandoning ourselves and where we're not where we're not nourished, where we don't have a self-holding to really catch what it is that our appetite is bringing in, the lessons that we're being asked to receive. Like I relate to Eros as a medicine journey. Like it's the strongest medicine I take. Like I've done ayahuasca and bufo and all these other things, and it's all epic. But for me, it's Eros that is the most potent, ongoing, um, yeah, thread that is just like vibrating me through my experience of self-realization and self-becoming. And what it does is it shows me all of these parts that I just spoke to about the hungry ghosts and it's a very very kind of fine line between what is generative and life-giving and what is like destructive and devouring.
Mm.
And And I'm just keep coming back to riding this wave between both of these kind of polarities, and not demonizing either one, but just being very, very curious about what is creating what on this path. Um, and I think that, coming around like with the patriarchal sex piece, I think that this is a very feminine, cyclical way of being with life, because it is an honoring of the cyclical nature of the devouring, destructive elements, and the renewal and the life-giving abundance, and really yeah, riding Eros into those different dimensions. I don't know if I'm making sense, but this is just what's coming through, where I'm like, oh, I just like it's hard. It's a difficult path, right? And it's why I really encourage people to have good mentors, good teachers on this path if you're wanting to work with the medicine of Eros, to really learn how to awaken through what it is trying to teach us. And what it's essentially what it's exposing about our own relationship to life.
Yes.
Yeah, and it can be painful, right? It can be a painful pathway, and I have a course called Mystical Femme Fatale, and this is what I'm really bringing through in this course. It's like, how do we awaken through the erotic current whilst staying grounded, whilst doing weight training, whilst, going for our walks and metabolizing our emotional system, whilst eating good foods, whilst expanding and opening and connecting to God, like how do we sensibly be able to walk this path in a sane way, without, because a lot of people get lost on it. Some people do get lost in the psychosis of the awakening. Some people do lose their grip with reality. Some people suicide because the sensations are just too unbearable, right? Like they don't know how to metabolize felt sense. And that devastates me. And this is what I see in this manosphere and all of the, and it also toxic feminist ideology. It's like people are getting lost in these places, losing contact with reality and with the experience of what life can be for them, um, because of the wounds, because of the pain, because of the hungry ghost, because of the addiction, and because of the lack of nutrients that people have,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, there's so much I could say to that, but yeah, I
No,
think
that's such an important like grounding part to complete with Shaney about very specifically, because it's the fear of inhabiting one's body to really feel what's happening, to have the internal sensation, to have heart connection. I think people instinctively know, whether they're not conscious of it a lot of the time. We know that it's an instinctive fear that if you actually contact that power, that aliveness, that eros inside, that it's going to show you things that are difficult to see. And so the vapidness, the vacancy is such a swing away from the fear of not having to deal with that reality, that somatic reality of eros. And so I love that you just named that in the way that you did, because this truly is the alternative. And it isn't easy, and it's kind of understandable that people want to do anything else but have the process of coming into their bodies. But the freedom and the pleasure and the liberation and the heart connection and the restoration of aliveness on so many levels just makes it so incredibly worth it. But I like your point that it's not easy necessarily, right? And I want
very
to
confronting. It's,
it's what
it's it's very confronting. It's like the ultimate path of confrontational intimacy. It's just like, oh, like How
Mm.
intimate can I get with me? How intimate can I get with others, with life? And how honest can I be about the parts of me that I'm not inhabiting? And if I'm not inhabiting it, something else is. And
Yeah.
often that's the social programming, right? So if we're not in our bodies, something else is programming us.
Yes, I actually say that all the time when I'm teaching exactly those words, in fact. Yeah, and I'm going to put this to the men, who want to be in that really strong masculine place. This is the challenge. This is the actual challenge, what you just spoke. If you really want to find out how strong you are as this ultra masculine desire to have that energy, this is actually one of the most challenging places you can discover yourself within, and to take this journey out of concepts and out of all the places that has maybe taken one to. And for men and women, right? But just speaking to that manosphere place for a moment in what else is possible. So
Mm.
you mentioned your course is for women, right? Because women
Yeah.
are such catalytic beings in relationships, in culture. And so, like myself, you have a focus on working with women. And is that online?
Yeah, that one's online. I would love to work with men more, but my audience is mostly women, and I teach and work from a female and deep feminine perspective. Um, yeah, so yeah, that it's just kind of ended up that way. But you're right, like women are catalysts, and the frequency, the frequency of the feminine does lead in many ways, and that's why it's really important to learn how to listen to that. Even collectively, like I'm listening to the frequency of what the feminine is that, you spoke about like women getting angry. It's like, okay, can we listen to that? What's happening? It's not just coming out of nowhere, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And what a relief it is to go so deep into the embodied experience after feeling so stretched from all the mentalization of the concepts in the online world. So it's beautiful for women to know that you offer really intensive, deep work in learning how to inhabit their bodies. And I'm going to put all the links to your things underneath the info with this episode. And thanks so much, Shaney, for joining this conversation and bringing the complex nuance and care that you tend to bring to your work. So thanks for everything you're doing in the world.
Thank you for having me and opening this conversation. It was, yeah, one of the best conversations on a podcast I've had for a while. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie.
Now that you just listened to this episode, tell me about your experience of this. In the new voice note feature, you'll see a link for it underneath the description. Whether you're a man or a woman, I welcome you to express yourself. Tell me what you want to hear more about. Ask a question or share a perspective that you want to bring. Even if you disagree, it's all welcome. And I will respond to your message by weaving it into future episodes. When you subscribe to this podcast or share it with friends or leave a review, know that it genuinely does help to bring more interesting speakers into this project, which is inspiring more people to have genuine connection and understanding and love and intimacy. And may we all be free from suffering.